Bindi is doing so much better now. So things like a lot of travel are a bit challenging for her at the moment. And so she'll be here next year to celebrate this wonderful night.
Steve Irwin spent his life protecting his daughter from everything: snakes, crocodiles, cameras, headlines. 20 years after his death, the one thing he could not protect her from finally broke his wife and son in public. Terry could not finish her sentence. Robert turned away from the camera and went silent. And what Bindi has been hiding from the world is the exact thing Steve told Terry to watch for the night before he died. It happened on a warm Saturday evening in early May of 2026 inside the Gilded Ballroom of the Bellagio Resort and Casino. The third annual Steve Irwin Gala had transformed one of the most iconic venues on the Strip into a slice of the Australian outback, with khaki tablecloths, ambassador animals roaming through the crowd, and Australian comedian Rove McManus warming up the room as master of ceremonies. The entire ballroom was packed shoulder to shoulder with conservation donors, Hollywood friends, and members of Robert Irwin's freshly minted Dancing with the Stars family. For the second year in a row, however, one chair at the family table sat empty. Bindi Irwin was nowhere to be seen. Her absence rippled through the ballroom before the first course was even served. When Robert and Terry finally walked the carpet together, every reporter pressed them for the same answer. Terry spoke first, her voice gentle and a little tired from a long flight in from Brisbane. She told E! News that Bindi was doing so much better now, but that travel had become a real challenge for her at this particular moment in her recovery. She promised the room that her daughter would absolutely be there next year to celebrate this wonderful evening, but for now, she was simply staying close to home. Then came the line that lit up social media within hours of the gala ending. Terry smiled with a kind of knowing weariness and said it was actually less taxing for Bindi to be home feeding crocodiles than to make the journey to Las Vegas. That single sentence carried more weight than anyone in the room realized at first hearing. To understand why that one comment mattered so much, you have to know what feeding crocodiles actually means at Australia's zoo. The Crocoseum is a 5,500-seat amphitheater built by Steve Irwin himself, the same arena where his memorial was held back in 2006. We are talking about a young woman who would rather wrangle a 14-foot saltwater crocodile in front of a live audience than board a long-haul flight to Nevada. Robert immediately stepped in to fill out the picture. He reminded everyone that Australia Zoo runs with a team of around 500 staff members across roughly 500,000 acres of conservation land. Someone had to hold down the fort while the rest of the family flew abroad, and his sister was doing a tremendous job in that role. He delivered the line with a proud smile, but there was something underneath the smile that the reporters could feel without him having to spell out. The truth is that Bindi has spent more than a decade fighting a battle that most people watching that gala would never have guessed at. Her recovery is genuine, but it is fragile, and the family has been navigating a delicate balance between celebrating her healing and protecting her from anything that might set her back. The reason Terry described travel as challenging was not a casual phrase chosen for the cameras. It was a careful summary of years of medical history that have shaped the entire Irwin family's life behind the scenes. Bindi first went public with her diagnosis of endometriosis back in March of 2023, sharing a hospital bed photograph on Instagram and writing about more than 10 years of tests, doctor visits, and scans without answers. That first surgery in New York removed 37 endometriosis lesions and a chocolate cyst that was attaching her ovary to her side. But endometriosis is chronic, and in the spring of 2025 it returned with a vengeance. On the very night of the second annual Steve Irwin Gala in Las Vegas, Bindi was supposed to be standing on that same Bellagio carpet next to her brother and mother. Then everything fell apart in the space of a few hours. Robert later explained that his sister had tried to push through the pain and attend the gala anyway, but the surgeon told her plainly that her appendix had to come out immediately and her health had to come first. Bindi flew straight from Las Vegas to New York for emergency surgery. Less than an hour after the procedure ended, she filmed a video from her hospital bed telling followers that her appendix had been removed, 14 new endometriosis lesions had been excised, and a hernia from giving birth to her daughter had finally been repaired. Across 2 surgeries, 51 endometriosis lesions were removed in total, along with a chocolate cyst, appendix surgery, and hernia repair. By August of 2025, she finally felt strong enough to share good news with her followers, saying she could function in everyday life again without wanting to throw up or pass out from the pain. She said she was beginning to recognize herself again. That recovery is the recovery Terry was protecting when she chose to leave Bindi at home in 2026. After Terry delivered her health update, the conversation shifted to something lighter. Reporters wanted to know about the running family joke that Robert had started a petition to get his mother onto the next season of Dancing with the Stars. Terry leaned toward the microphone with perfect timing and joked that she would review the petition and get back to them in 5 to 7 business days. The carpet erupted in laughter. Robert grinned beside her like a son who had been planning that moment for weeks. He had previously joked that he was determined to wear her down eventually. He pointed out that he had not known he could dance, and Bindi had not known she could dance either, yet both had succeeded on the show. Those dancing genes, he insisted, had to come from somewhere. Then Terry's expression softened. She admitted she felt honored to even be asked. She remembered Bindi describing dancing on the show as the closest thing to flying she had ever felt, euphoric and free in a way nothing else had been. Robert leaned in and promised the cameras he would make it happen someday. But behind that joke was something much deeper. Months earlier, during Dancing with the Stars dedication night, Robert performed in honor of his mother. Through tears, he told the camera she was his hero. He had been just 2 years old when Steve died, and as he grew older, he began to understand how impossible it must have felt for Terry to stay strong for 2 children while carrying forward the conservation legacy she and Steve built together. At every milestone where he wished his father could be there, his mother had been there instead. During the performance, Terry walked onto the dance floor in a yellow dress, and Robert lifted her, twirled her, and collapsed into her arms as the music swelled. The judges cried openly. Terry later admitted that after losing Steve, it had been difficult to smile again for a very long time, and that her children were the reason she kept getting up each day. A few weeks later came the 20th anniversary episode where Robert and his partner Whitney Carson recreated Bindi's own Dancing with the Stars freestyle tribute from her season. At the end of the dance, Bindi herself joined them on the floor. Images of Steve holding baby Robert appeared beneath their feet. Robert dropped to his knees, overcome with emotion. The judges awarded the performance a perfect score. Robert later admitted he had not known the footage of his father would appear, and that every time he stepped onto that floor, he carried his father's message with him. By the finale in late November 2025, Robert was physically exhausted and nursing a serious rib injury. Yet he pushed through all 3 rounds and won the Mirrorball Trophy. He became the youngest male winner in the show's history, and he and Bindi became the first siblings ever to both hold Mirrorball trophies. Terry, Bindi, Chandler Powell, and Grace Warrior were there to witness it. Terry later wrote that even a zookeeper could learn how to dance. Back at the Vegas Gala months later, reporters asked the question that has followed the Owen family for 2 decades: what would Steve think if he could see all this? Terry answered with humor, saying Steve would probably be amazed they were in Las Vegas of all places. Robert answered more emotionally. He said everyday strangers still come up to him to share stories about how his father inspired him. The fact that Steve's message remains so strong 20 years later shows how powerful he was, and how strong Terry has been to keep that legacy alive. Robert gave his mother full credit. Terry broke the mood with another joke, saying the one thing Robert had that Steve never did was a willingness to take his shirt off for wildlife. Everyone laughed, but underneath the laughter was the truth of what this family has carried through grief, healing, and joy. Just 4 months after the gala, the Irwin family will mark 20 years since Steve Irwin died on the 4th of September 2006. Robert has spoken openly about how grief feels for him compared with Bindi, hers like a stab, his like a suffocating blanket. He once described catching a massive saltwater crocodile on an expedition and discovering it had been tagged by his father years earlier, calling it an unmistakable sign Steve was still with him. Robert continues to say that keeping passion, positivity, philanthropy, and conservation alive is not only an honor, but something crucial for the next generation. With Terry beside him, Bindi recovering at home, and little Grace Warrior growing up surrounded by the khaki legacy, Steve Irwin's voice still echoes through Australia Zoo every single day.